Cool. So yeah, welcome to this talk, Community-Owned Farms and Their Role in Delivering Food. So the reason that we put on this talk, or that we were thinking of a talk like focused on community-owned farms, or community ownership within growing and farming, was because it's so fundamental to Kindling Farm and the values and reasons that we're establishing our farm as a community-owned farm through the community share offer that we're running at the moment. And the fundamental values behind that are that communities and ordinary people have their voices heard, and that there is greater resilience within the food system, and kind of strength in local food systems, and that multinational corporations and governments can't get their hands on even more land and control of the food system. But we are obviously far from the first farm to have the idea of setting up a community-owned farm, and we're still in the process of establishing Kindling Farm. So today we wanted to just invite some really amazing speakers from some farms, from 3 farms across the country that have really, really hugely inspired us in our work to kind of model Kindling Farm on a community ownership basis. And as we will hear, they're all quite separate models themselves, and we've been so grateful to all of them for demonstrating to us some amazing solutions to the challenges that we have and may face in setting up Kindling Farm. So tonight we have Charlotte from Fordhall Farm, Sebastian from Stockwood Farm, and Alice from Sutton Farm. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Charlotte first to introduce herself and talk a bit more about Fordhall Farm.
Thank you, Lizzie. Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. So we can bring up our slides. Right, can everybody see that? Yeah, super. If I'm not sure I can see the chat anymore though, Lizzie, so if I go over time, I can see your picture, so you'll just have to wave at me frantically. So yeah, as Lizzie said, I'm Charlotte Hollins from Fordhall Organic Farm based in Shropshire, and we've been in community ownership now since 2006, when we had to raise £800,000 to save the farm from industrial development, and we've now got about 8,000 community shareholders across the UK and even internationally as well. And I'm just going to explain a little bit about how Fordhall works with our tenant farmer, with the community owned structure that we've got, and how the relationship between those two are critical to our success and have been past, present and future. Oh, scroll through. So this is Fordhall Farm. We're a pasture farm. We grow grass, so we've got a small community growing area where we do grow a few vegetables, but predominantly we're pasture, registered with the Pasture Fed Association, and we've been farming organically at Fordhall since just after the Second World War. And we've been tenant farmers there for a few hundred years. And this is my late father on the bottom left-hand corner there, Arthur Hollins. And this is one of our woodlands on the farm. So as I said, we've been organic since just after the war, when Dad realised the detrimental effects that chemical fertilisers were having on our land at Fordhall. And he turned the system over to an organic farming system to nurture really the life within the soil, and want to create a system where the farm could produce food every year, predominantly without being reliant on artificial inputs or external inputs of any kind, really. He wanted to know every year he could produce food on the farm without being reliant on buying anything extra in. And he did that by building up the soil life at the farm, but also creating farming systems which were symbiotic in their nature, so that we try and utilise everything at Fordhall to its kind of most advantage to benefit the farming system. And so we create a system, or we've run a system called foggage farming, which relies on woodlands, as you just saw there, for our livestock to shelter in during the winter months. And then it has about 3 other different principles, which are diversity, rotation and native breeds. So diversity, we've got about 70 plus different grasses and herbs and plants within our pastures at the farm, which provide different vitamins and minerals for our livestock and help keep our pastures productive right throughout the year. Rotation, our fields are a kind of a mix between sandy fields at the top of an old glacial valley that we're in, and meadowland down near the river, which floods very easily and gets very wet. So in very simple terms, we can have the livestock grazing in the top fields during the winter months, which are nice and dry and sandy and free draining. And then during the summer months, they graze the meadows, which are always nice and green and lush, however dry the weather ends up being. And then we have native breeds of Aberdeen Angus predominantly, and a few Herefords, which are nice hardy British breeds. They're good at being outdoors and they're not too big and heavy on the land. And I talk about this farming system because it's sustainable in the way that it's not relying upon external imports. It's not utilising any, it's not very carbon hungry, I guess. But it's also limited by the amount of grass we can grow. We can only rear as many cows as we can grow grass, essentially. And so it's a system based on quality, not based on quantity. And that system works because we sell everything we produce at the farm direct to the public. And the livestock levels up during the summer months at Fordhall, we probably would have about 150 cattle, about 200 sheep. And we also have free range Gloucester Old Spot pigs, and we have between 40 and 60 pigs at the farm. So that explains a little bit about the kind of farming system that we run. And then I'll start to come over to the community ownership scheme, which is your side of things at the farm. And that came about in the early, well, started off the story in the early 1990s when Muller Dairy became our next door neighbour. And the landlord spent then 10 years thereafter trying to evict the family so he could sell the land for industrial development. And out of these challenges and adversity came the opportunity for change. And it was actually by looking back in the farm's history, and we could see that when Fordhall was its most successful, there were lots of people involved. And here you've got WI visits that we had many of at the time of the farm. Dad also had people on working holidays. He did lots of school visits. He had a dairy at the farm at one point and employing up to 50 local people. He offered fishing in the river. He had a country club in the garden. So we were always a farm that diversified. But even Ben and I could see that when we were growing up at the farm, when it stopped having people involved in whatever way that was, that's when the farm kind of really lost its heart and its life. So although we were fighting eviction notices for 10 years and the farm began to deteriorate, the real deterioration speeded up when people stopped being involved. And so we thought then the key to maybe turning all of this around was bringing people back to the farm again. And this started as some volunteer weekends. And we just held weekends to help the farm really get back on its feet. And we just gave people soup and bread and tea and cake. And they worked for the day and then said thank you to us at the end of it. It was great. But what it also meant was from the very beginning of my Ben and my journey at Fordhall is there were lots of different people involved and there were lots of different ideas coming forward, different ages, different backgrounds, different interests. And throughout this period, you know, we were trying to find a way of securing the farm long term. We were asking the community their views, and we then expanded it out to holding events at the farm, really anything we could think of that was going to involve the local community, hopefully for them to see it as an asset to the local area and something they'd like to have for the future. And all of this culminated in a community meeting that we held at the farm in February 2005. And out this community meeting, we basically looked at what the community wanted from the farm, both 10 or 50 years down the line. And we then put that together with what we wanted from it as farmers, both then and in the future. And it was by putting those two kind of visions together that we created the community structure that we have at Fordhall today. So we're a charitable community benefit society. And it was set up to secure the farm for community and environmental benefit, but also to keep farmland accessible and affordable to new and young entrants to the industry, and to help then rebuild those connections between, you know, people, the land, food, farming, the environment, and so forth. Soon after, we were able to secure an option to buy the farm, and we were I've kind of created a new presentation which is slightly out of order to my new one. So within the Community Benefit Society, we sold shares. We set the price of our shares at £50 each, and our shares are non-profit making, so they don't return any kind of financial dividend. They are lifelong shares and they can be passed down in a will. And we set the minimum value of our shares at £50. And it's one member, one vote, not one share, one vote as a community benefit society. So it remains completely democratic as an organisation. So we were hoping through the sale of this community share scheme, the community would be able to own and utilise the land, which is what they said they wanted to do. They wanted to be able to access it, learn about it, use it. And we will hopefully then be able to offer a tenancy to my brother as a tenant farmer to continue managing the land. We were successful in raising an option to buy the farm, but we were only given 6 months in the end to raise the asking price of £800,000. And so we did that by selling our community shares and holding lots of events at the farm. We were fortunate to get lots of publicity at the time. And on the 1st of July 2006, we were able to place the farm into community ownership. And so it's owned by 8,000 members across the world, as I said, through that community share offer. And then we've offered a long-term tenancy to a tenant farmer on a 99-year lease. And he runs the farm shop, the farm business. He lives in the farmhouse as a normal limited company. He has his own staff and he pays a rent just like any other tenant would. The only difference is the landlord, not only are they thousands of people, but as an organisation, they were also on site utilising that land for the benefit of the community. And so there's a very close working relationship between the two. And through that community ownership scheme, we've also been able to invest in the farm a lot over the last kind of 15 years or so. So these were some of the derelict buildings when we took on the farm, and this is kind of what that building looks today. And between the Community Trust, which owns it, and our tenant farmer and his businesses, during the summer months, collectively, we can employ over 100 people on what is only a 140-acre farm. And normally you might only expect that to conventionally employ half to one person. So it does have a huge economic impact, as well as it having a great sustainable impact for the way that we're able to manage the land at Fordhall. So some of the activities that the Community Trust or the Fordhall Community Land Initiative runs at Fordhall include our cafe, meeting room space. We run school visits. We have a care farm which works with adults with learning disabilities. I noticed Social Care Farms and Gardens we're watching today. We're a member of them. And we have a youth project that supports vulnerable young people, predominantly those which are struggling in the classroom environment. We organise events at the farm when you can, when things open back up again. We still have a great strong volunteer base and regular volunteer Fridays and weekends throughout the year. The farm is open 6 days a week, 12 months of the year to the public, completely free, members or not members, for them to be able to access and enjoy. We have yurts which we rent out for glamping. We also offer weddings on site. We do tours, and most recently we've constructed a straw bale building, which is our new straw lodge, for wellbeing retreats, Cub Scouts, brownies and so forth, and also as a base for our weddings. This was finished just before lockdown, so it hasn't had its full running yet, unfortunately, but we're looking forward to getting it into use. And then Ben is my younger brother, and he's the tenant farmer, and he runs an event catering business where he goes out to some of the big events, some of the music festivals and so forth. He runs the farm shop and butchery, as I said, on site, and he has responsibility for managing all the livestock on the farm, and essentially makes all of those day-to-day decisions himself, as long as he's maintaining the organic status of the farm and as long as he's allowing access to the land and the fields for us to be able to use for the community, then he's fulfilling his tenancy agreement. And he does have a seat on our board of directors as well, so that the communication between his strategy on the farm and our strategy as a community landlord is combined, because my day job now is managing the Fordhall Community Land Initiative on behalf of our members. And we have a board of about 13, and we have a staff of about 25 from the Community Trust point of view. So I think I'm coming towards the end, Lizzie, is that right? I've lost track of time. So kind of to summarise some of the benefits, I've kind of given you a bit of a whistle-stop tour there. But there are some huge benefits to having such a big membership, or even just any membership of community members, local or otherwise, that support you and want you to be there. From a business point of view, for the activities that we run on the farm, either which are community focused, business focused, or as a tenant farmer, just knowing you have that support, because they're not all there visiting us every year, some of them have never visited us, but knowing that those people are there and are willing us to succeed makes a huge difference to how we problem solve, how we take on challenges, and it makes us so much more positive about the farm and the future, which makes a big difference, I think, to all of our decision making. We also know that the land is secure and it will never be lost for development in the future, because that land value has been taken out of the equation. It's in community ownership. So when our tenant leaves or retires, the succession rights in it for his children. But if they don't take it on, then the trust is there to offer another long-term tenancy to somebody else coming into the industry. Whereas if Ben and I had been wealthy enough to buy the farm ourselves, we could still do all the different community projects that we do at Fortall today. But if neither of our children wanted to take that on when we retire or when we pass on, then the farm would be in the same position 50, 60 years down the line. It would be facing development because of its location, and it would just be lost later on. Whereas by placing it in community ownership, especially with those shares being non-profit making, that incentive to sell for development does not exist. The motivation from members is about safeguarding it as a working farm for the future. And that strong and combined vision gives us a massive strength for how we take the farm forward. And when I explained earlier the farming system, and you saw how extensive it was, you know, we can only rear as many livestock as we can grow grass. But by having the farm shop on site, by having a community which support the farm and support that farm shop, a lot of the customers to the farm shop are not necessarily shareholders either. You know, we do have the audiences are split and mixed, but by having that community support and that sense of support from the community means that we can farm in that way. If Ben was selling through the normal supermarket supply chains, we would not be able to manage the land in the extensive way that we do. We would be forced into pushing a bigger volume through the farm, which then would lose the sustainability and extensiveness that we currently have. So the two do really rely on each other. We've learned lots of things. I won't necessarily go through all of this, but I think one of the biggest things is that sharing the journey with our members is incredibly powerful in so many ways. We've seen it benefit our members as much as it's benefited, you know, us. They come to us with ideas. All of the projects that you saw there weren't the ideas of Ben or myself, or half the time our staff. They were ideas from our volunteers, from our visitors, from our members, you know, and that's what gives the farm its strengths and its stability and its vibrancy. And every challenge provides an opportunity. I think we've seen that with the pandemic. We see it with the climate crisis. So much opportunity for us to make change and take things forward in a more positive way. So yeah, the most important thing we did, I think, was to open the farm gate, start those conversations going, and the structure that we ended up with was a result of those conversations. It was a result of that combined vision, and a vision that we've stuck to. The vision we put in place in 2005 when we first had those meetings, we pretty much only just realised, because the Straw Lodge was in that original vision then as well. All the projects were in that vision, but we have been very flexible about how we have got there. We've adapted our journey depending on the circumstances that we've been in. We've changed priorities around, but the vision has stayed clear, and we've gone back to our members to make sure that vision is right and is still the right vision to have, in the same vision, you know, every 5 years or so. So it's, to us, I can't sell it enough. I love the fact it's community owned. It was a very scary thing to go into, not knowing who was going to be members and potentially which ways they might pull the organisation that you might not have been wishing for, but it really hasn't been anything other than a completely positive experience. And I shall end there, if that's okay. Lizzie, is there anything else, or you pass on?
Brilliant, thank you so much. And yeah, it's a really, really lovely story to kind of see a family-owned farm kind of at threat of being developed on and bought by hugely wealthy companies and saved by the community. So thank you. We'll move straight over to Sebastian, if that's all right, from Stockwood Farm.
Yes, hello, and welcome everybody, and thank you for having me on at your webinar. I've got to try and share my screen. Just try and share that one. Okay, can you see that? How do I make it work? Slideshow, play from start. Okay, so my name's Sebastian Parsons, and I've got a background in business and finance as well as farming. And this story is really a family story. We, as a family, have a strong interest in the community and the land, and we actually heard about Fordhall Farm and picked up on their ideas to develop our project. But this first slide is our vision, really, what we're trying to bring about, the way that people and land connect and heal each other, if managed and owned in the right way. So my story starts, well, now, how do I move forward? There we go. My story starts today, 1947, with a picture of my mum on the milk round, or delivering, I think maybe delivering straw or hay to the animals. She was born and raised on Broom Farm, and when I was little, Broom Farm looked like this, and I went there every chance the family had for the weekend and in the holidays. Now, Broom Farm was owned by my grandfather. He had 4 children. It never occurred to him that my mum could be the person to carry the farm forward, so he never gave her that chance. He gave his sons each a chance to take the farm forward with him, fed up with them all one after the other, and in the end, in the 1980s, the farm was sold. Now it's one of the first 2 biodynamic farms in this country, therefore one of the first organic farms in this country. And there was a community appeal which raised £400,000, which in those days was a lot. It wasn't enough. This farm was sold for £650,000 to an oil magnate. This upset me and my sisters. And there we are, that's my family. My sisters and I had our own business, and it was a success. And without speaking to each other about it, we all wanted to redeem the loss of Broom Farm. And so we got the chance, as a result of our business, to buy Rush Farm. And Rush Farm is in Stockwood, and it was where our business was located. So we actually bought that in 2005. And I note the connection with Fordhall's journey. So as they were launching into their community ownership, we were just launching into our farming story. Obviously, my mum was the farmer, and she dragged her husband along too. So they had a third career being farmers, and they're still farming. So the thing about Rush Farm is that it has a business park on it. There's a business park. So the business park is in the corner here, and there's about 200 acres of pasture, well, about 180 acres of pasture and about 20 acres of woodland. And we've got the farmhouse where my parents live here. That green there means that my mum and dad own that field. And this purple area is the business park. Now, there are, quite a few units there. So roughly 100 people work on site. There's roughly £250,000 of rent coming in each year. And on this roof now we have solar on 1B. And we've got a heat plant, renewable heat plant by unit 2. And so the renewable heat and the rent earns something over 300,000. Now, when we first thought of a community farm, we only intended to put this yellow land into the community ownership, just like Fordhall had, but we realised that we had all sorts of obstacles in our way. For instance, a very large fundraise. We would have had to raise pretty much £1 million, and it was a tall order. We had a brainwave and thought we will link the business park to the land. Although that made the fundraise quite a lot larger, it meant that we could offer a return to our members. So that's the key difference between our model and Ford Hall's model. We have got a commercial asset linked. Now, you could do a community project like this with any sort of asset. It could be housing, it could be commercial property off-site. It doesn't have to be on-site like this. The main thing is that you are blending the investment of land with something else which makes a high return. Obviously, you've got a community of people here, some of which get involved in the life of the farm and the life of the society. Right, so there we are again. Now this is what Rush Farm looks like. It's Worcestershire, so south a bit from Ford Hall. Llyn sheep, about 200. Hereford cattle, about 100. And our farm is biodynamic. So the fundamental principle of biodynamic farming is that the farm is seen as a living organism. So you've got sort of a macroorganism of the farm supporting the microorganisms of the animals and the plants and the trees and everything. So we look at our farm as a single living thing, and we've got principles of sustainability embedded in that, obviously. One of the things that we do differently from organics is that we use the herbs of the farm to create energizing sprays and cow manure as well. That we create energizing sprays and energizing compost that we spread on our farm to build its fertility. We're on very heavy clay, and there's no question really of growing arable crops without enormous machinery, which we don't want. We do have a small garden, and we have a lot of vision for care farming and for community engagement. We want buildings like Fordhall have got, where during holidays and weekends, the general public come, and during the weeks we have visitors and educational activity. So what's on the next slide? That's our business park, just to give a feeling for it. The rent is pretty reasonable. We don't really have a filter on who can be a tenant. Some people think that we should filter the tenancy, but the reality is that our project depends on the viability of our rental income, and we don't want to artificially suppress that. However, we would never choose to limit our tenants, because we see the tenants as an outreach opportunity, and every tenant that comes obviously learns all about our alternative approach, not just to agriculture but also to economics, and you know they're business people, so I think that makes for some very interesting conversations. We've got lots of converted stables, and behind you can see the big barns they've been converted to. We had a kindergarten where our children went when they were little, but that closed a few years ago. And this in the middle, there's my daughter, and this is a summer fair. So we hold these community events as often as we can. That's my big son and my little daughter on a tour of the farm, and that's me holding forth on the subject of biodynamics in all likelihood. And those are my slides. So I just wanted to share with you some facts and figures. We've got 400 members, again, from all around the world. There is a sort of third of the members are from around us, we would say maybe in the West Midlands. People have come towards us from the organic movement, biodynamic movement, also people who are interested in conservation and people who are interested in alternative economics. Because we offer a 5% return and have paid that return every year since 2014, we do have quite a few people who have invested money that they live on. That's, in technical terms, that's impact investment. So you're investing your money to make an impact and get a return. And I've had lots of conversations with people about that. It's sometimes a challenge. I summarize it by saying you're working with the head and you're working with the heart. The heart wants to see these positive outcomes, these positive impacts in the world, and the head understands that the investment is going to make a return and is therefore a viable option for part of the investment portfolio. We have a higher average ownership than Fordfall, of course, because of the difference in the return. But we still have half of our members owning between £100 and £500. So half of our members are still just doing it to be part of the project. And we've got the other half roughly investing around £2,000 each. But the highest is the maximum of £100,000. We've got some people, lots of people on 10,000, quite a few on 50,000. We also have a large bank loan, CAF Bank. Obviously, that's an ethical lender, a lender-focused charities aid foundation. It's focused on the third sector, focused on making a better world. We find them very easy to work with. We're currently looking at evolving our business part. We've got a very large unit, which is out of scale. It's 14,000 square feet. The next biggest unit is 3,000 square feet. We're looking at evolving that into a number of smaller units so that we can have more companies, more opportunities. Also, the visitor centre, we're looking at the farming company taking over one of the units. Okay, so just like at Ford Hall, we're renting our land to a family company. So Charlotte's renting to her brother Ben. Stockwood is renting to my parents and my brother-in-law Chris. So Anne and Adrian Parsons and Chris Burdett own Rush Farm Limited, and they've got a tenancy as long as they maintain the biodynamic management of the farm and pay their rent. So if they choose to stop farming at any time, that's perfectly all right. Again, like with Ford Hall, the Stockwood Community Benefit Society will find another long-term tenant. And to help us do that, we've got an anchor relationship with the Biodynamic Land Trust. So they'll help us find a biodynamic farmer who has the skills and the knowledge to take on the farm, should my family ever decide to step away from it. The business itself is very simple to run. It's just a rental business. I am amazed that Charlotte's got 25 people. That's just wonderful, having all of that activity in their community society. We have that aspiration, as I said, through our education outreach and our public outreach. We haven't got to that point yet. So I'm running this with Alison King, who is the company secretary. We've got about 7 people on the board. It's a part-time job. Alison does 1 day a week, and I probably do 1 day a month. And we have maybe 4 board meetings a year. I've just summarized the contact details. I'm available if you have any questions. If you've got a project and you want to talk it through, if you have an idea and you want to test its viability, then I'm completely available. You have to make the best of your opportunities. And one of the peculiar things about Rush Farm is that it's got a connection with the Archers. And we do have several members who have become members just because they are interested in the Archers. But what that did give us was, it gave us a publicity hook, and meant that we got more coverage. But if you're thinking of doing a community project, then you have the Stockwood model to sit alongside the other models. And if you're talking to potential investors, which if you're following the stock model, you will be, and they're likely to be more business orientated and do something called due diligence and test out your thinking and your ideas and your planning, then you have the Stockman model to refer to, because that's got a track record now, showing that there is a virtuous circle to be had between the land and people when they work together in community, transforming everything for the better. So I think, have I reached the end? I have reached the end.
If that's the end of your presentation, then yeah.
Well, I can talk for hours on any of the things. I just run through it briefly, and I hope that the timing's about right.
Brilliant, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Sebastian. And again, a really nice example of kind of family tradition and history kind of saved, I guess, and a good comparison to Fortall Farm as well, looking at the stats and figures.
Yeah, farming is a way of life. I mean, it's like a vocation, and so it's always, in a healthy system, it's going to be orientated around the family and how to make. My sisters and I, we didn't want our children to fight over Rush Farm the way our parents fought over Broom Farm, and so we've dealt with that. That's one of the big wins of this community model. And that all of those people in that community who invested, they've transformed their lives for the better, and they're transforming other lives for the better. It's a virtuous circle all the way. And I don't know why it isn't enormous already, but there we are. We just have to keep reaching out.
Working on it. Let's hand over to Alice from Sutton Farm, our final speaker.
Hi everyone. My name is Alice and I'm from Sutton Community Farm. So we're in South London. So you can see in this nice satellite picture that this is kind of looking back towards London. So we're just on the green belt of South London, and we are based in the what's called the Little Woodcutter estate, which is a land which is owned by Surrey County Council. So unlike the other two farms we've heard from, we don't own the land, we lease it. But interestingly, the Little Woodcutter estate was originally set up as small holdings for soldiers who were returning from the First World War, and they were asked to provide food for London. And it was also proposed that it would be a kind of well-being benefit to them. So it's an amazing kind of parallel to what we're trying to do today in terms of combining food production with well-being. So yeah, that's where we are. And I'm going to give you a little overview of what we do at the farm. So first up, we grow vegetables. So in fact, we grew about 100 tons of it since we started 10 years ago. About 20 tons a year now. We've upped our production, and that's on 7 acres of land in Wallington, South London. We use agroecological and organic farming methods, which means that we're looking after the soil, we're promoting biodiversity, we're restricting the use of fertilizers and pesticides. So all of that means that we're like promoting and protecting the local environment rather than degrading it. And we mainly grow vegetables, but we've recently actually planted an orchard and a fruit cage, so we can add fruit to our list of skills and crops too. And the veg we grow goes into our veg box scheme to around 600 customers a week. So in this way, we're helping like South London residents get access to fresh, healthy, sustainably grown food. And similar to what Charlotte mentioned, having that direct to retail opportunity of selling our produce straight to the consumer is really a big part of what makes the farm viable. We're a community business, so we, like the other two examples we've heard from, we're a community benefit society. We're owned by our members, and that means that every single veg box sold, the money goes straight back into the farm and promoting the farm's activities. We involve volunteers with us at every single stage of the process. So volunteers come help us with growing the vegetables and packing the veg boxes, and lots of other tasks as well, like DIY and maintenance, or more desk-based things like graphic design and marketing. So we benefit from all of their hard work, and then they benefit from learning new skills in food growing, getting some exercise, meeting lots of people, all of that kind of thing. And we also offer supported volunteering opportunities for people with learning disabilities. As Charlotte said, like, it's amazing, really. It's just such a win-win situation. Like, people come, they work really hard, they do loads of jobs for us, and then they tell us how they've had a great time and thank you, and that they want to come back next week. So really, the volunteers and the farm, like, one couldn't exist without the other. We also try to educate people about food growing at every level. So we have a 20-month horticulture apprenticeship. So this is Rachel, one of our trainees, growing salad. And then we have work experience placements for young people, where they come for a few days or just a day and learn about food growing and see it as a potential career. And then we have more like visitor events, like this was a tour at our harvest festival. So trying to engage with people wherever they're at in terms of their existing knowledge about food growing, and just sharing what we're doing is a massive part of what we do. So what I mainly want to talk about was the question that was posed of, like, what were the challenges and what were the solutions that we found to setting up our farm. And I was not involved in the farm when it first started. It's been going for 11 years and I've worked there for 3 years. But so I chatted to some of my colleagues this week and talked to them about what they thought, some of the big challenges were setting up the farm. So the first few things, like on the top of that slide, is quite a lot around, like, the clarity of the business plan. So when we started, it was not a family idea. It was not a one person who set it up. It was a group of people who got together, and that was great because we had like a ready built community in a way, but it also meant that we had lots of people with quite a lot of different ideas, and we didn't know how we were going to make money. There was a few options, but then they kind of tried to do them all at once. So there was a mobile veg stall, there was contracts with the council for outreach work, they started selling veg to cafes and restaurants, they were getting grant income for various different projects, and all of them in and of their own right were good things to be doing, but it meant that the whole thing was spread very thinly, and the staff really struggled to keep up with everything. Once about 5 years in, we decided to focus on the veg box scheme as a way of getting a sustainable recurring income. And once we were able to do that and be able to model how that was going to work, it allowed the staff to focus and to build the infrastructure around that. And now, because of COVID, we've benefited, but also because of all the hard work that we put into building our website and building all of the processes around selling veg boxes, we've now got a sustainable model. And that means that we can actually start focusing more now on a lot of the social impact stuff that we want to do. Kind of along those lines, it felt like there was a little bit of a tension sometimes between the community aims and the financial viability. But as I just explained, it's kind of felt like it was important. It's always important to remember that any organization, even a non-profit, needs a profit and a surplus in order to survive and to pay the staff and to keep doing the good things that it wants to do. And on that note, there are a few instances where perhaps we were chasing income rather than chasing profitability, rather than building profitability. So we had a few misplaced grants that actually distracted us from the core aims of the business. And then, as a community business, I think it's important to think about governance, but governance is like not a very sexy, accessible topic. There's lots of rules, there's lots of paperwork, it's quite bureaucratic. So that's kind of the bad bit. But then I think the positive side is, as we've seen with our volunteering and as we've seen with all the community gardens around the country, people are really, really keen to participate. And if you create the opportunities for people to get involved, then they will come and they will give so much of their time and their energy. So I think that's like a kind of a real opportunity for community businesses and community farms to just like take advantage of all of that energy and passion that there is in around in local communities. And why, so yeah, at the end I just want to talk a little bit about like why it's all worth it. So some of those challenges I just explained, what do you get when you overcome those? So we've been around for 11 years now. This is 1 year out of date. This gives a kind of snapshot of some of the outputs that we've managed to deliver in that time. And really, but what really matters is kind of the impact that has on people. So we know that, as I said, people really enjoy getting involved and their well-being is really improved from being able to participate in the farm. So their physical health, their mental health, their sense of community, making lots of new friends, eating more fruit and veg. Like there's just too many benefits to mention, really. And I think that the community ownership is really important because it goes hand in hand with that ability to participate. And at a bigger picture kind of level, we think that community ownership is really important for sharing wealth, for sharing power, and for giving people the opportunity to get involved in something which they find meaningful, and for illustrating a vision of something that can can illustrate what a different model could look like. And as Stockwood said, like a kind of way in for people to see what different ways of dealing with things economically and socially and environmentally are. So that's why we think that like community ownership is really important, and it's just being built into what we've done ever since the beginning. That's it from me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's really amazing. Thank you so much, Alice. It's really good to hear kind of a different model applied to something that isn't necessarily owned but leased. And yeah, it kind of just shows a different way of accessing this community ownership style thing, but without maybe doing a lot of the kind of, well, I'm sure there's other huge amounts of work, but yeah, the work of kind of buying the farm. Cool. So that brings us on to questions to the panelists. We've got a couple in the chat, and we've got a couple ourselves, but I'll start off by asking one that was posted in the chat. And yeah, anyone else, feel free to ask anything about the community ownership aspect, or yeah, like I said at the beginning, share your experiences of your farm or your hopes and dreams. This one I think will goes to all of the panelists, and maybe Helen, just from a Kindling Farm perspective, you might also answer. It's about the approach to wildlife on the farms, and particular foxes and badgers that they maybe not exactly encourage but live with in peace. So yeah, I guess how do you kind of encourage biodiversity? How do you deal with it having an adverse impact on your farm, and looking at kind of other ways that maybe other farms deal with certain wildlife, or difficult to manage wildlife, like hunts, like controversial activities such as hunts. Yeah, so feel free, whoever wants to answer that one first.
Yeah, I don't mind answering that. Oh no, sorry, are you going in, Alice?
I was just going to say, I think we're kind of lucky in maybe being in that kind of greenbelt type area, which is a slightly different setting that we don't have to deal with this kind of thing so much. So the only wildlife that we have is easy, positive wildlife. Like, yeah, lots of toads and bees and all those things, which we do actively promote, of course, through having lots of wildlife areas. You know, we're a 7-acre farm, but only 3 acres of that is cultivated. A large part of it is over to wildlife areas. And we do a lot of, like, we have green manures that we have as part of a rotation, which helps to attract lots of pollinators and birds and so on. So yeah, so it's quite straightforward from that point of view for us.
Yeah, and we're very, I mean, I think we're all going to be on the wildlife side, aren't we, as bearing in mind the types of farms that we are. From a badger's point of view, we've got loads of badgers on the farm, we've got loads of foxes on the farm, also got lots of rabbits for the foxes to feed on, luckily. So we don't really have a problem with the lambs. We've never had a problem with TB. We're quite lucky in the fact that, I don't know if you remember the picture I shared earlier, but the boundary of the Ford Hall is about 80% river, and then the rest of it is a very busy main road, which does make us a little bit of an island for any potentially poorly animals coming onto our site. So it means that we can be quite exclusive for wildlife in one way of looking at it. And we've got otters in the river and trout and crayfish and water vole. We've got barn owls, lots of red listed birds as well. Still trying to attract newts. I've just built a new pond. We've got about 4 ponds on the farm, and I'm still trying to get great crested newts, which haven't appeared yet. But yeah, we have a huge amount of wildlife and biodiversity which we celebrate and we rely on really to keep the farm healthy and sustainable. Everything's part of that big food web. You know, we need every part of nature to be in balance for things to be healthy, and we completely recognise that and want to nurture and encourage it. We don't know everything about all the wildlife and biodiversity we've got. We're learning about it all of the time. In fact, I had an ornithologist at the farm only last week asking if he can do another survey for us to see how it's changed over the years. But it's something that we certainly encourage in every aspect.
I can follow on from that exactly. In fact, last week we had the ornithologist doing the follow-up visit. If you shout out to my father's blog at stockwoodcbs.org, you can join the regular email, or you can go and read the past issues. But higher level stewardship is a big part of our farming, and that means lots of areas for wildlife, lots of wetlands, 20-acre wildwood. I mean, there's so many hares, deer, 3 sorts of deer, 3 sorts of owl, and there's a river with crayfish, and we've seen I think we've seen an otter, and nothing like as big a river, but that diversity is there. We've had a lot of trouble with TB. Our cattle have been set back several times by TB, but we haven't had any badger culls or anything like that. And yeah, we get the hunt. We're in a really traditional area of Worcestershire, which is very old-fashioned, and there's a hunt that comes through. We don't join in. We aren't friendly to them, but we don't make ourselves enemies of our local community either. So yeah, wildlife biodiversity, I was going to say the most important part of our wildlife is the actual microbiology, that having that completely healthy, solid foundation of microbiology in the soil is the most important thing. So yeah, that's what it's like from a Stockwood perspective.
I'll just very quickly say a little our little Kindling Farm plans in terms of the wildlife. We obviously haven't got the large scale farm yet, but the plan is, as well as being massively inspired by all this lot, we've been really inspired by agroforestry farms that we've been to visit, and so our plan is to do is to kind of grow veg and cereal among rows of trees. And I won't go into that apart from to say it just seems super biodiverse. Basically, it's kind of just creates loads of habitat, yeah, it's kind of the kind of carbon capture and everything around that way of farming just feels like a best way that we, in our way of farming, in the kind of what we want to produce, which is veg and cereals on that scale site. It feels like agroforestry is the way forward for us to do that. So yeah, we feel really excited, and just listening to all you three talking about what happens on your site just makes me feel really excited about the possibilities for that. Yeah, because I think it is really interesting, because it is always a challenge, isn't it? From our small growing site, there are challenging bits to wildlife as well, like, you know, when you're growing veg, like rabbits and slugs and stuff, because you're not growing veg to feed, you know, you're growing veg to feed people basically. So it's about how do you create that balance and how do you recreate that ecosystem. So yeah, it's great to hear that you've all managed to do that, and that is kind of our aim for that as well. I think we've had some talks on agroforestry that will be on the recordings, and we'll talk a lot more about that, so do look for that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really good to get a question in about that, and hopeful to hear what you're all doing already. So thank you. We've got another question in the chat. So regarding transport to site for the community, does it involve too much driving, or do the benefits outweigh the carbon footprint? And should horticulture get government support like other farming, and what kind? I don't know if you want to repeat.
I can start. So on the transport question, we're kind of lucky that we're on the edge of London, so that means that we're close to our audience. Transport is still not ideal though, because we are in zone 5. We're not that super close to a train station, but loads of people cycle, and yeah, come from the immediate local area. So I think that's one of the benefits of having these kind of farms in these kind of peri-urban and urban areas, is that you can give easier access. And I know that Sustain and lots of other people are doing great work to try and increase the number of these types of farms in London and also in other cities like Sheffield and Bristol, which would be really cool. What was the second question? Oh, about horticulture and subsidies, I remember. And yes, definitely, we think that horticulture should be supported more. There's a few different facets to that, I guess. Like, one thing is around small scale farms. So at the moment, large arable farms get a certain amount of subsidy based basically on the amount of land that they are working with. But below the threshold, I can't remember what it is, but there's a certain threshold that below that you're not eligible for any kind of farming subsidies, and we're definitely in that category. I think they are looking at that with the Elms work on the post-Brexit subsidy plan. They are looking at trying to include smaller horticulture farms, which would be really beneficial if that does go ahead. And yeah, I think just in general, there should be a lot more support for horticulture, because fruit and vegetables are obviously really important in terms of health outcomes and in terms of climate outcomes, and they're just not subsidized in the same way as other types of farming are at the moment, and other types of food.
So Stockwood's really in the middle of nowhere, and you cannot get there on a bus or a train. You can get within a 20-minute walk using a bus. When we have community activities, we sometimes run a shuttle so that people can gather at the nearest train station, which is a 20-minute drive away, or the bus stop in Inkborough, which is a 5-minute drive. So that's the way it is for us. And absolutely believe that around every city there should be community-owned farms that run education, so that children in the cities get access to land, and so that families get access to proper food. I do have that vision of that belt around every city being brought back to life again by community-owned farms. And in terms of subsidies and grants and things, the whole economic thing is a big question. It's absolutely unbalanced and shot to pieces, and I don't know where to begin in answering that. So yeah, obviously it would be nice, but we shouldn't need it anyway, because the way food is priced and everything is wrong. But the way we sort of live our values in society and understand food and nature and everything, it all needs sorting out. So yeah, could go on that theme for an hour or two, so I'll stop now.
Yeah, and I guess we're similar in a way. We are outside of the town, but we are walking distance. So especially in the lockdowns, actually, prior to that, everyone came by car. But since the lockdowns, we've had loads of people actually having the time and deciding they're going to walk to us instead of jump in the car. And we also have a bus route right at the end of the drive, which unfortunately isn't used as often as it could be, but we are easily accessible by bus as well. And more people are coming by car or cycling, which is really nice at the moment. So it's down to people's preferences sometimes more than what is possible. They could walk and come to us on a bus, but they choose the car. And I can't comment on the horticulture one because our horticulture space is so tiny, it probably wouldn't qualify.
Awesome. The questions are flowing in now, so we'll get through them. The next question: what position do the farms take on GM, genetic modification, and new technologies for food growing?
I'll carry on if that's okay. I don't like it personally. That's my own personal view. Our pigs, whilst they're not organic, are completely GM free, which does mean that part of their feed is organic, such as the soya, because I don't think it's now possible to get soya that will be guaranteed as non-GMO soya for animals. So yeah, we don't have any GM on the farm, and we try not to have any ingredients that we use within our cafe or shop that have GM in them where possible as well. So try to sidestep it, but it is a bit of a scary movement that seems to be coming towards us, unfortunately, which I try not to think about.
From a biodynamic point of view, we couldn't be more against it. So it's just awful.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would just add that so the GM thing kind of applies to lots of things like soy and corn and these big commodity crops, which we don't have any need to get involved with. But there are similar issues around seed sovereignty that really apply to vegetables. So we try to do some seed saving and try to educate people about how they can do that at home, for example, because where seed comes from and how having access to good quality seed and heritage breeds, which are designed for our climate and not designed for greenhouse in Holland, for example, is really important. So yeah, it's all about being able to keep control of the food system in the same way that owning the land is really important. Owning the seed and that bit of it is also really important.
Brilliant, thank you. So a question from David and Nari. We are part of Transition Town Northampton and of a fledgling sustainable food place for West Northamptonshire. Have you found any partners particularly easy to work with?
As I kind of alluded to in my slides, I would say our partnerships, none of our partnerships have really flourished. They've kind of seemed good on paper, but then it's been quite difficult to maintain them and to align the interests. So I'd love to hear from other people about successful partnerships that they've had, because I feel like it is an opportunity, but it can be difficult to actually make it work.
During the creation of Stockwood, we partnered very successfully with Resonance down in the Southwest, with FX, the share platform, and with Greenhouse PR. And in terms of local partnerships with education and things like that, nothing has lasted. So there's good professional partners available for projects in this area, but still lots of what we've done has had to be pioneered by us.
Yeah, similar to Seb, really. We've kind of had to lead the way a lot locally, but I have to say that when we've asked for it and when we've encouraged it, we have had great working relationships with our county council. And last year we started up a partnership project with a local food bank, which was in light of the COVID crisis. We were offering sessions to help combat social and rural isolation and loneliness, which we worked with our food bank with. And we've just started doing some social prescribing work. So we're working with our local GPs and link workers as a result of that. And I kind of would pick up Alice's point that she said earlier is, partnerships can be quite draining, and I think it is about picking the right ones, and it is about those partnerships lasting for as long as they need to, and then sometimes putting them to bed and then coming back to them in a few years when there's a need, and not carrying them on unnecessarily and having meetings for the sake of meeting's sake, which you can do sometimes. But I think if it's a good partnership will always benefit both parties. Last year we started a partnership with Children's Services at the local council because we had our new straw lodge, which was sitting there empty, and it was useful for them, and we were getting a small amount of income from it. It benefited both of us, and it was a partnership which just started, which is growing into something now a bit more long term. But I think it's a case always with partnerships: take the opportunities while they're there, seek them when you need them, and it's okay to park them when they're not needed. And Pasture Fed Association, Soil Association, Plunkett Foundation, Power to Change. I mean, there's a whole lot of organisations that we've worked through the time as well.
Great. So the next question is from Nora regarding Sutton Farm. So regarding staff on Sutton Farm, how many people are staff? Are you still getting grants? And what percentage of budget goes on staff payment?
So we have 11 members of staff, which is about 7 or 8 full-time equivalent, I think. And that's a kind of alongside about 80 volunteers a week who are coming to help us. And I actually did a calculation the other day because someone asked me that I thought was interesting. So the ratio is like 2 to 3 in terms of staff time. So 2 hours of staff time has 3 hours of volunteer time. There's obviously many more volunteers and they give smaller amounts of time, but in total it's about 50% bigger than the hours that the staff put in. And yeah, staff costs is by far our biggest expenditure. And so it's about 1/3 of our income goes directly into staff salaries. We're a London living wage employer. So, that means that our lowest paid members of staff are getting paid like £21,000 a year. And, anyone who's a grower will know that that's quite a lot of money. And so to sustain that, we, that's why the veg box scheme is so important, to be selling that directly to the retail customers, to have a chance of being able to pay our growers what they need to live on to live in London. And in terms of grant income, yes, we are still getting some grant income, specifically from City Bridge Trust and also the James Trust, who are 2 really good funders because they give us like unrestricted core funding essentially. So they're really good partners and funders to work with, because they really support our core aims and they're not asking us to do things on top of what we were already doing, really.
Thank you. Got an interesting question from Vicky. To all of the panelists, are you involved with any green prescribing, and particularly would be nice to know anything from Charlotte on the social prescribing to learn what works best.
So yeah, I'll just quickly say that we're not doing any official greens prescribing or social prescribing. However, we do see it, you know, it is what we do day in, day out in terms of giving people opportunities to come, but we are not being paid for it in that way. And we do get referrals from certain organizations, but not currently from any GPs, but we get referrals from people, kind of the partner organizations, social work type things.
Yeah, our social prescribing has only started really in the last few months, and it's actually only been formalised in the last few weeks. So last year we started doing it on an informal basis, and we formally linked up with the GP practice in the last few weeks, and have our first referral coming in this week, in fact. But social prescribing is not funded. We have to self-finance it. We have some grant funding available at the moment. Only in the last 6 months have our local council employed a social prescribing officer and link workers. So only very recently has Shropshire actually put some money into making those links and connections. There's still zero amount of money going to any of the organisations that are offering services. They've simply invested in someone to link these groups up. I think it's vitally important. I do think it can help reduce medication. I think we need to be nurturing people along their journeys and nurturing the root causes of problems, not just plugging the gap by giving people a pill. It drives me around the bend. And I think nutrition and health has a massive part to play in that, as well as, you know, green social prescribing. I think the two together are really, really important. I think it's going to be some years before a proper funding strategy comes into place from anything centralised, because I think it needs to prove its place. I think there's evidence out there, there's lots of talk about it, there's lots of understanding the concept's possibly good, but I think that the NHS and those powers that be probably need to see hard results from things going through a formal social prescribing route for anything to take place. And then you have the pharmaceuticals that throw into the mix. But I do think it's hugely beneficial, and it's something we really want to grow and build, but we are in the early stages.
I don't have anything to add further than that, other than, yes, it's a fundamental part of our vision.
Awesome, thank you. Hope to see more of the social prescribing then. Got one from Sarah from the Social Farms and Gardens. It would be interesting to know, a lot of the farmers, a lot of the care farmers we support are very interested in the opportunities presented by social prescribing, but apart from the 7 DEFRA pilot projects, which each have about £500,000, there doesn't seem to be any money to cover the cost of the places or fund the providers. Is it something we're trying to raise and advocate for on behalf of our members? Do you want me to repeat that?
I think that's a statement, isn't it, rather than a question?
Possibly, yeah. It was just maybe, I don't know, Sarah, if you want to expand on that. I'm just reading off a screen, sorry. I don't know where Sarah is, but feel free to come on. Hello.
Hi, sorry, no, can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, sorry, it was more of a statement, because there was obviously kind of a bit of discussion going on in the chat really about the social prescribing side, and it's something that me and my colleagues at Social Farms and Gardens are trying to kind of link in with, and I've been linking in with those 7 DEFRA pilots, and I was actually just typing a response there to what Charlotte was saying, in the fact that I think she's right, and I think as much as we are there to advocate on behalf of the sector, I think until there's some clearer evidence and cost benefit analysis that actually puts a financial value or a financial saving forward for, you know, the benefits and the savings to the NHS in terms of medications and things, then I think we're probably still going to struggle, even though there is a lot of general research around the health and well-being benefits of nature-based activities. So it's something that as an organisation, and particularly as the kind of care farming team, we're trying to support and trying to help members navigate and link with sort of social prescribing link workers all over England, really. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that's going to make a huge amount of progress immediately, but it'll be interesting to see what comes out of these 2-year pilot projects. They are test sites, so they're all doing things in a slightly different way, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that, really, and whether there is any clear evidence that then can be looked at, and potentially funding can then be sort of allocated. But it's a bit of an uphill battle at the moment. But the link workers are there, and they're very keen to link to all these organisations and all our members. However, the members don't have the cash following the person and the referral, which is the issue, isn't it? We can't all be sustainable organisations if we're all constantly hunting around for grants all the time. So sorry, that was all I was trying to say, really.
Thank you so much for expanding on that. That's really interesting as well. So we've got another question from the chat. How important is it to give warmth, appreciation, social opportunities, celebration and refreshments to customers and community owners or volunteers on the farms?
I can go. Yeah, like really important and a really lovely thing to do as well, obviously. So we know from our volunteer surveys that the kind of social element of what they're doing is really, really valuable. And that's one of the main reasons that people enjoy volunteering, is making new friends and having a chance to spend time with people in a way which is quite different actually to time that you might spend like other places that you might meet people. So, doing a task together or something is, yeah, it's a different way of interacting with people, and it's something that people really value. We've tried, we always try to kind of appreciate our volunteers and our members in lots of different ways. COVID the typical way of doing that is to have a nice party and put some pizzas in the pizza oven. In COVID, that was not possible. So we had to like change tack a little bit, but we found some different ways of doing things actually that worked quite well, which was just like having a luxury tea station with biscuits and cake, instead of just like tea and coffee, and having posters up where the staff had written like thank you messages on, and things like that. So yeah, just little things here and there really help to kind of build that connection with the farm and with each other as well, which is really nice.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Alice has said there. I mean, any relationship only works and flourishes when it's mutually beneficial. And I think it's understanding why you're getting the support from those members or volunteers or customers. You need something out of it. They need something out of it too. And when you find that wonderful balance between the two, everybody wins, and it makes it a fantastic place to be. I mean, yes, warmth, appreciation, all of those things that you said there, Vicky, and Alice said, celebrating successes is a really big thing. And we have people that come to visit us every week. We have, whether it be customers or volunteers, and we have shareholders that have never visited us. And so we're trying to maintain engagement and also show appreciation to all of them. So sometimes it's about sending newsletters, making phone calls. Sometimes it's special events on the farm. Sometimes it's just saying hello as people walk past. We've built that into our organisational culture. We have 5 values at the farm, and 2 of those particularly relevant here. One is gather the flock, which is about involving everybody in what we do. It's about having an inclusive approach to what we do. It's about respecting each other's differences and celebrating those differences and bringing everyone along the journey with us. And one is place in the sun, which is that we want to be a happy place. We want to be a welcoming place, and we want everybody that visits Fordle to feel that as well. But on the flip side of it, I would say it's equally important to share the challenges, share the struggles, and share the failures and the learning that comes out of them as well, because actually it's only by showing both sides of the coin that you really take people on the journey with you, so that they feel they are there with you. And I say it all the time to our staff, and we don't always hit the nail on the head, and it's easy when you're doing it face to face, but certainly when people aren't there face to face, they're saying, you're writing to your grandma. Remember, whatever you write it like you're writing to your grandma. She knows you, she loves you, she wants to be part of what you're doing, and try and communicate it in that way. But yeah, we've actually always been amazed by how much people have got by being involved with the farm, and we've learned all these ways of engaging people, and we continue to learn it by all the different people that get involved. And I think that diversity is very exciting. I love involving people with the farm, as you can tell. I'll stop talking now.
I think that's wonderful. I can't add anything beyond agreeing with everything Alice and Charlotte have said. That's what it's all about. There's a certain level, an important level.
Brilliant. So we are nearly out of time. So our final question to each of you would be, have you got, or what would you say has been your biggest challenge, and what would be one top tip or a bit of advice that you'd give to people either already with a community farm or setting their own farm up, or just as a dream? So one challenge, one of your biggest challenges, and one top tip.
So I think our biggest challenge has been developing the market for our veg boxes, and therefore the income that comes out of that. And so yeah, because as I said earlier, we need to make money to be able to survive and to thrive. And so it's really important to focus on whatever your business model, your revenue model is. It doesn't have to be selling something like a product. It could be being a care farm and getting grants or funding to do that, or it could be some other model. But just make sure that you know what the model is and what you're aiming for, and really go for it.
Yes, be clear about what you're doing when you're explaining it to people, so they don't get confused. So practice explaining in as few words as you can. I think that is the biggest challenge that we've faced, because we've got this blended model. What is it? Is it an investment, or is it a community project? And I'm like, both. And that's fine. And people do get it, and it's getting easier. But that's, yes, just clarity all the time. Clarity. So yeah, that would be my top tip. Become very clear, talk it through a lot, and practice.
I think my top tip would be in very similar, a strong collective vision, involve everyone with it to begin with, and have a journey, but don't be restricted by your plan. I think the most important thing is to have the vision, hold the vision, make sure it's a collective vision, and be clear in your vision and work towards it. But your path to get you there almost certainly will look nothing like the business plan you first put together. That doesn't matter. What matters is that the vision stays strong and that you're always working towards it. I said that we recently put our straw lodge in 2019. That was part of our vision in 2006. And actually, as I was talking about it afterwards, I started to put a timeline down, and almost each of the things in our vision happened every few years. We do a lot of different things at the farm now. We didn't start them all to begin with, but we were flexible in how we delivered them and when we delivered them, to do them when it was the right time and they were going to have the most chances of success. And I think some of our biggest challenges, and there's been loads of challenges. The first one was trying to save the farm from development in the first place. The second one was we've built up this great momentum. How do we keep it going without everything just going flat on its face a year later? And I think since then it has been about maintaining engagement with 8,000 people, many of whom are not local to us. And we did a survey with our members 10 years on, and actually came back and they said that they felt more engaged 10 years later than they did back in 2006. So whilst we've always been battling with it and not sure we're getting there, we luckily have been doing something right, but it is hard work. We do employ someone 2 days a week to just help keep connected with our members. But you know, those challenges are all part of our successes in an equal sense.
Oh, that's all really, really inspiring. Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you again to all of the speakers and to everyone who came here tonight. Yeah, it was really, really good Wednesday evening spent, as somebody just put in the chat. So thank you again. Some of the speakers have put their email addresses in the chat, so you can get hold of them there. And also just to say that we have got some more talks in the Kindling Farm Webinar Series coming up, so you can find them on our website. And also just above, like up in the chat a little bit, Helen has put a link to sign up to our e-news, where you can find out all about our events and the progress with Kindling Farm. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to hear a little bit more about another community-owned farm soon. But yeah, that's it from us. Thank you so much to everyone who came again. And I'll send out an email with the recording so you can share it as well with anyone who missed it. But yeah, enjoy the sunshine.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Oh, Charlotte, it's your little one looking big suddenly.
Yeah, this is Catherine, who should be in bed.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you, Helen. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much for coming. It was really great.
Oh no, our pleasure. Take care.
Inspiring. You are